Cynthia Garrett, lots to talk with you about today. Appreciate you joining me. I want to start with the book. You have this book, The Naked Truth, and you really go all in on a lot of really important issues in culture right now, some flammable topics as well. Why did you write this book?
Because I just can't take the lies. I just can't take the fact that majority of people seem to be plugged into a matrix and they have blue pilled their lives behind these lies, Billy. And it's like, I feel like I took the red pill a long time ago, and I've always known that the emperor was naked, but never has he been as naked as he is today. So it's really, I'm passionate about this book. I it has a lot of my own journey in it, my own journey as a young woman, and the mistakes that I made, because I didn't have a relationship to sex as sacred, and that has to do a lot with my background. Uh, I just wasn't told that sex was sacred. I wasn't told that it was something created by God and it's for the marriage bed, and I was sexually abused as a young girl. And honestly, I say that, and I also say this, that doesn't really matter, because I see a lot of people making the same mistakes I made, and their backgrounds and their brokenness have less to do with anything than just the consumption of lies that we've been fed historically around this topic.
Yeah, and having an insanely successful career in TV, right, as you have in media and doing all the things, being VH1, you go down the line, you've done a lot. Being in that environment too, how much would you say that that environment either fed into your viewpoints on sex, or infused them in any way?
Entirely. I mean, a lot, because I spend a lot of time in my book, a good chapter, talking about media, because the media is, I think, the most powerful force on the planet today. When Trump came along and called it all fake news, he really did us all a service, because in large part, it is fake. It is fake. Hollywood is fake. It's about make believe. It's about pretend. It's about escapism. And that's when it's doing its job, right? At the highest level. That's what movies and fantasy are about. And I was looking to escape like most people. And so you can escape inside of this world of escapism. And so Hollywood had a lot to do with it. Look, it was also that I was surrounded by people who very much thought that it was all good, all meaning anything you want to do, anything you want to think, anything you want to feel. And that's really Hollywood. And let's find an issue that is explosive and let's champion it. And Hollywood creates agendas, and I saw that. And I kind of got tired of sitting around these very high level dinner tables at these very elite dinner parties, really and truly realizing that Hollywood was very hypocritical. The majority of it really didn't care about people. They wanted to send handouts down to the bottom of the hill, but God forbid those people come through the gates and live on our part of the hill. And I saw that. I could see the actual BS in all of it, and it started to really disillusion me.
Yeah, and at that point in time, when it comes to faith, what was sort of your worldview? As you're working in Hollywood and media, how did you see things, and how did that come to a point of maybe transformation or change where everything maybe came together?
Yeah. I mean, I went into Hollywood a Christian, but I would have to say, and the way I've described it for years, is that I was saved, but not at all surrendered. I really had no grid for what it meant, or what it meant to live a life surrendered to Christ, like where he was really Lord of my life and my decision making processes, and Lord of the people I hung around, Lord of the decisions that I made and the way that I thought and lived. He wasn't. I thought that I was blessed because I was saved. And, it was like driving a really great car. And every now and then I would look in the back seat and go, oh, thanks God, what a blessing. Thanks for this wonderful ride, and I think a lot of Christians live their lives and are living their lives that way. And so for me, there came this point where I realized, okay, I've got everything I want. I'm on the private planes. I'm walking the red carpets. I have my own shows. All the designers want to dress me. Uh, but what I don't have is peace in my soul. And what I don't see is real, actual power and purpose changing lives, like really impacting lives. I mean, at one point, I was sitting on the set of one of the daytime talk shows I was doing one year for Sony, and we were doing a makeup tip segment, and then we would move to the cooking segment, me and the other girls. And I remember sitting there, and the executive producer came out of the booth, and he said, "Okay, you look bored. You've got to take the bored look off of your face." And I said, "Yeah, Ray, I am bored because these women that I'm looking at in this audience don't need makeup tips. They need to know how to actually live a powerful, meaningful life. And we're not giving them that." And he was like, "Honey, you think too much." And that was always my curse. I think too much. I think about people, and I think about God, and I think about the state of affairs of my nation and the world today. And if you're a thinker, then you think your way into taking the red pill and unplugging from the matrix. You have to, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and at some point you have to say, what is this information that I'm taking in? Where, and this is for the general consumer too. So many people out there have been impacted by Hollywood and media and what they believe about so many issues, and they don't even realize that they're not even aware that these messages have permeated their hearts and their minds, and over time have changed the way they're viewing different things. And that kind of brings me back to the sexuality issue and sex in general. Purity, this word purity has gotten a bit of a bad name of late, even in some Christian circles, right? Where people will sort of shun it or say, hey, purity has been misused as a concept. Why do you think there's been sort of this hard shift on that particular issue?
Well, because I think the purity doctrine, of the 90s, the early 90s, right? And through the 90s, I think it felt like a load of Pharisees putting a load of rules on our backs, but doing nothing to help us carry the load. I mean, this is typical, this is classic what Jesus came to speak against. And so I think a lot of people, in trying to follow the rules, lived with a lot of guilt and shame because they were not successful. They weren't following the rules well. And so then, and honestly, I hate to say it, but I've listened to a lot of the young men who, were the big advocates of this doctrine. And this really fell hard on women because it felt like a lot of slut shaming, to be honest with you. And, most girls, guys too, but certainly girls, I think the fragility of our sensitivity needs to know that God gives us beauty for ashes. Bible. We need to know that he takes our sin and he still clothes us in white if we turn to him. We need to know that we have a savior who loves us even though we've made mistakes, and we need to be able to be pointed back toward that. And I think what I've tried to do is sort of throw that aside and really build a foundation in which people understand that the way to be pure is to, in your life, is to realize that we're all sinners in need of a savior. And if you grab a hold of Jesus and you begin to work on a pure relationship with him, what is a pure relationship with him? A relationship in which you really get to know him. In that, you find purity in your mind, purity in your soul, purity in your body follows. I mean, listen, when I first went to Christ, he didn't tell me what he was going to change about me. If he did, I would have run the opposite direction screaming, right? He didn't. What he did was he loved me, he saved me, I experienced his love and his saving grace, and then I wanted to change my life, and that included my behavior, and that included becoming abstinent.
you know, how did people react, right? Here you are in Hollywood and media, you're doing all this. And once you started going on that real transformation of not just looking in the backseat every once in a while and saying, hey, God, thanks, but really living that and allowing your life to be transformed by it, how did those people in Hollywood and media that you knew for so long react to that?
I think they're still reacting. when it was only Jesus, they were fine because, oh, we love Cynthia. She's loving and kind. Cynthia, will you be the one to pray over dinner? That was fine. There was some blowback with Sony Studios at one point on a television show that I was working on one year with 3 other women called Life and Style. And it was a daytime talk show, sort of a younger view, if you will. And I wore a t-shirt on set one day that said pray, and it had praying hands. That was it. That simple. That literally shut down production for about 3 hours while the head of production for Sony came into my dressing room and demanded that I change my t-shirt. And I looked at her and I said, no, absolutely. This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
So
You
wait, they
knew you were
literally were like, we're not doing the show today until you change the shirt. And it was a pray shirt. That's all it
It
was.
said pray and it had praying hands on it. That was it. And this woman screamed at me. I'll never forget it. And she said, I'm a Christian too. I'm a Catholic and I just don't do this stuff. And I don't know why you do it. Well, she was married to a Muslim man. So there was a lot of confusion, I think, in her life around her own faith, which is fine. But she had this weird axe to grind with me being a very clear Christian and with what she interpreted by me wearing this t-shirt that had praying hands on. She interpreted that as, I guess, I don't know, as something evangelical. I don't quite get it. I was just wearing it because a girlfriend made the t-shirt and I thought it was really cool, right? Well,
And the
here's the
vast majority
irony.
of people pray. The vast majority, regardless of whether they're Christians or not, right? So, I mean, it's almost like the least offensive thing to say.
The least offensive. She should have been more concerned about the fact that I was on set 2 hours late in the studio every day, evangelizing the girls who would come to see the show, the taping, who were in the audience. I mean, she didn't know about that the security guards were staying late and all of them were getting overtime and they loved me because I was literally like hanging out with the audience after. But the funny thing is about that whole story, Billy, is it was our gay executive producer who came down to the dressing room in the middle of all of this brouhaha. I'm fighting with the wardrobe girl. I'm fighting with the head of production. And he goes, okay, let me just get this straight. Let's get this straight. You want the only girl on the show who tests with a crazy high approval rating with our audiences to take off the t-shirt that says pray. And let's face it, even I pray. Exactly what you said. He said, he goes, you want her to take it off are the only reason the show's still on the air, or you're going to fire her. He goes, I just want to be very clear. He goes, because I'm thinking about the New York Post headline tomorrow. And they all got really silent. And he looked at them and he goes, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And he looked at me and he goes, Cynthia, love the t-shirt. Let's go finish filming. And that was the end of that.
Wow.
And
So
I
they were
always,
threatening to fire you, though. I mean, it got that heated.
yes. Yeah. She was firing me
Wow.
that day. And he was like, we don't even have a show without her. She's the only one the audience is like. And he's like, we have 4 hosts. The other 3 are completely hated in focus groups. She's the only one anyone likes. And you want to fire her because she has on a t-shirt that says pray. Arguably, that's why she's relatable to the audience. I mean, it was Billy, it was like the stupidest thing. That
It
was
does
my
show you
biggest,
that bias that we're talking about, though, too, right? I mean,
oh yeah, completely. And that was my biggest sort of blowback moment because for the most part, my Hollywood executive friends they were all okay with it. The only time that who I've become and who I became when I really surrendered and started living the Bible, the only time it really started to cause rifts where I've lost friends is because I also started to vote Bible. Because if you're living your life in accordance with the word of God, there comes a point where you need to actually look at how you're voting and you need to make your vote line up with the party that is at least attempting to line up with godly values. And that's when I went from being a Democrat to a Republican. And that's when Trump came into the picture. And that's when a lot of like my 20 and 30-year friends were like, it has really caused drama,
wow.
really.
And was that traumatic for you, too, losing people who
Yeah.
you knew and loved for so long, who simply because And by the way, you knew Donald Trump personally, did you not, as well? So you had this personal connection, but then making that decision and losing those friends, that had to have been hard.
It was hard. It was hard because as I tell people all the time, Donald may or may not remember me, but I certainly remember the kindness he showed me when I needed him to give me an interview or come to my events because I was a young girl just getting started in Hollywood. And it started because my agents pimped me out and gave my phone number out to a lot of very powerful men when I got my first big NBC show. Now I call it pimping because in hindsight now I realize what they were doing. I was the young pretty girl with the new talk show and so guys would call and they wanted to know me. And if those men were big important clients, they would give out my phone number like without even asking me. So Donald was in a group one year of guys who called, I'd love to know you, love to take you to dinner. He was single and he was dating. And we ended up, going out. And well, we didn't make it out. I actually was picked up in a car, driven to his place at the Trump Tower, and went up to have dinner. And this is a long story that I'm really condensing. But it was kind of funny because my brother, quote unquote, Lenny Kravitz, had given me the playbook. He said, this is what he's going to do. He's going to invite you to dinner, and then he's going to have you come over to his place. And then he's going to turn down the lights and give you a glass of wine, and he's going to show you everything around the city that he owns in the floor to ceiling glass window walls. And I looked at him and I go, oh, come on. How do you even know that? And he goes, well, he's dated some model girls I know. And I was like, oh, that's ridiculous. No, he's not. So I end up agreeing to go to dinner. I end up getting picked up and taken to his place. The lights get turned down. He gives me a glass of wine and he starts pointing around the city at the things that he owns. And I literally like spit the wine everywhere laughing. And he kind of looks at me and turns on the lights like, what was that all about? And I go, Donald, you're getting a reputation. And so, he kind of looked at me and smiled. And I said, okay, here's the deal. I live with someone, I have a boyfriend. But I said, I'm not interested, but I really would love it if you would be my friend because I'm just trying to build a career and I could use a really powerful friend like you. And you know what? He laughed and he kind of chuckled and he goes, okay, kid, fine. And, and then he had to take a phone call. He said, excuse me while I take a call. And, he came back about 10 minutes later and he said, listen, something's come up business wise. We can't have dinner. I'll have my driver take you home, but you call me for anything you need. And I winked at him and I said, oh, you just got a sure thing, huh? And we laughed and I left. And that was the end of that. And I called him soon thereafter. And I asked him to, can you do this interview? Can you come to this event that I'm putting together with, Roberto Cavalli and all these people? And he showed up for me. And then he started showing up with Melania. And who knew, that the rest would be history. But I can't say anything bad about him because he's not a racist. He's not, a misogynist who hates women. He was very kind and polite to me. And listen, that's more than I can say for the way I was treated by some of the black Uber male power players who only wanted to sleep with me and didn't care to help me, you know?
So
So I
it's
don't,
it is
I don't, yeah.
interesting. And I remember hearing that story that you just shared at a dinner one time. You were speaking a few years back, and I was like, what a really interesting story, And I have heard many similar things about Donald Trump from other people as well who have had experiences with him. And so again, people are complicated. The media has one narrative, and we tend to see only that narrative when it comes to people who are not favored by those who are presenting the news. And you know this again better than anyone, having worked in that. And kind of coming back into your journey, because I think your journey is so interesting. And here you are with The Naked Truth, this book that is really tackling issues that are incredibly important to people who are trying to live that life that you described, a life for God. When you think about the book itself and the impact that you hope that it will have, what is that impact?
I hope that people will read it and make a decision to try to, I call it a purity revolution, right? I hope that it starts a purity revolution. That revolution begins in the mind. And so my hope is that when people read the book, in their mind, they will see the logic and the history. They will see how we've degenerated from, where we once were as a nation that really and truly had really great family values. Marriages stayed together more often than not. Children were raised with prayer in school. There was a purer way of living and thinking. And we all know that. We all call it the old Americana. But what happened? And I think for a long time, it started with the Greeks and the Romans and the philosophers. But certainly by the time you get to the sexual revolution and the feminist movement, we began this descent into total sexual chaos, total unsacredness, and an unsacred view of sex and sexuality. And it's why we're where we are now. So what I've tried to do is take the reader on this journey, sharing a lot of my own personal confusions and chaos and mistakes, to arrive to a point where you go, there is really no other way to be successful in my career, in a marriage, at raising children, at being a friend, a good spouse. Like, there's no other way to be successful but to embrace purity as a mind, body, and soul revolution for your life.
Well, I love that. And I so appreciate you breaking that all down. You've had an incredible journey, and it's amazing to see where you are and what you're doing and how, you're just advancing the gospel and the truth and helping people see through so many of the lies that they have been told. Cynthia, I appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Billy. Thanks for supporting me. I appreciate you very, very much.